The overhead press, or military press as some call it, that is what we're going to be discussing today, guys. Okay, so got the barbell behind me, ready to do some pressing, currently in the middle of doing a little bit of a workout, and I said I'd stop to give you guys some tips. Okay, so one of the things that I see most commonly when we see people overhead pressing is that because it is such a challenging, humbling exercise, that people are tempted to start to use extraneous bodily movement to start to cheat, essentially. Okay, now in order to qualify what is cheating, you need to know what the rules are. So if you're just doing pressing and you've decided that I'm doing push presses and that's my goal, that's absolutely fine. But if you're doing a strict overhead press, then you want to keep each rep standardized and strict in line with the technique that you have chosen. So this comes back to the question of progressive overload. When we talk about progressive overload as it relates to training, basically what we are looking for is that we have some means of progressing the stimulus over time in line with our adaptations. So if I'm pressing 60 kilos today and in 4 weeks time that starts to get easy, I'm gonna have to start to do 62 and a half, 65, 70 kilos, progressing over time. But what it does not mean is that because I did 60 kilos today, I need to do 62.5 or 65 in the next session, okay? That's not how it works. We need to first adapt to build the qualities so that we can then put on that extra weight on the bar, and we can't necessarily force it, okay? So what you don't want to do here, guys, is just start to totally destroy your technique and just you know, throw it out the window and just start bouncing just for the sake of putting on more weight, because what you have to realize is that you've then changed the exercise. Now, it could be one means of progression. For example, what you could do is say, I'm gonna do 60 for 5, okay, but I feel like I have a bit more in me, but I don't necessarily have a few more full reps. So you could do 2 reps where you do use a little bit of momentum. The option is there, but for the most part, for general strength and hypertrophy or muscle building purposes, we want to keep things nice and strict. So that is the first point. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of reps in a second and show you guys what I'm working through. But basically, what I want you to make note of is that when I get under the bar, I'm really tightening everything up. So I'm trying to brace my abs hard. I'm going to take a deep breath, brace my abs, make my abdomen and my trunk feel like it's a cylinder that is filled with compressed gas. So when I breathe in, I'm thinking about everything within my torso like it's literally a gas cylinder that's about to pop. So you want to maximize the pressure in there. I'm also going to keep my glutes really tight, so I'm tightening those and again compressing that cylinder, making everything feel like it's super rigid, so that when I do go to press the bar, it's not going to lead to me falling back or losing my position. Now you do have to lean back a little bit, of course, because you need to get the bar out from under your chin if you are starting from that position. So there is going to be a little bit of a lean back, but ultimately you want all of the force that you can produce to be transmitted into the bar and hence into the movement, because what's going to happen if you're not tight is that that force will lead to you losing your positioning, fall to one side, fall back, whatever. And that is a loss of force. So that's an inefficiency. And as a result, you're going to be able to lift less weight because of that efficiency. So the more you can create stability, the more that you can make sure that it is your muscles that are doing the work. And the more that stimulus to your shoulder muscles, if that's what you're concerned with, or from a force production perspective, the more of that force is going to be transmitted into the bar. So that's ultimately what we do want here, guys, okay? So as I get stuck into the rep, excuse the little patch at the back of my head, not the finest of haircuts. Basically what we're going to be doing here, I like to take a grip that is around shoulder width, maybe slightly inside or slightly outside sometimes. I kind of like shoulder width, but again, there's some room for variation there. Some people go with a bench press grip and that's probably too wide, and some people go really narrow, and while that can give you a little bit of a benefit in terms of being able to kind of bounce off your triceps because of that contact in the arm, I'd basically rather just choose that shoulder with grip. So that's what I'm going for. And when I get under the bar, I'm squeezing the bar hard, okay? Even as I'm setting up, you'll see my triceps contracting there, squeezing everything. As I get in under it, I'm making sure that my knuckles are pointed towards the ceiling. So that's what I'm trying to keep in mind the whole time, is knuckles towards the ceiling, so that when that force is coming down from the bar, it's actually going straight through my arm. So that's what you want. You want everything to be nice and strong, as opposed to being really bent back here, because if I've got a force applied through there, that's a wrist extension force, and then that's going to lead to some inefficiency there, because that's not as strong a platform as it being straight down through the arm. So that's what I'm thinking. Squeeze, boom, tight, in under. I normally go forward with one leg, then I get under the bar, take it out, I'm tight here, then I take my breath, and straight up overhead like that. All the time I'm keeping nice and tight, especially on the way down. Now, one thing to notice is that some people do have different breathing preferences. Personally, I prefer that when the bar's up overhead, that's when I start to take my breath, because then you can keep it in and stay tight as you come down to the bottom of the eccentric. The thing that is a little bit difficult to coordinate there is that first rep, okay? Because that first rep, unlike something like a bench press or many other exercise variations such as a squat, you are starting from the bottom. So it's a bit like a deadlift. You're starting from the bottom of the concentric as opposed to starting from the top and then performing your eccentric and then your concentric. But there's some of the things that work for me, guys. Again, like, I'm not the strongest guy in the world in terms of like being an overhead press expert, but they are some of the cues that I found to be helpful personally, and some of the cues that I found to be helpful with clients as well. Some additional pointers to note is that, like, one of the things I think is quite helpful to think about is, as soon as the bar does get out kind of over your forehead, I'm thinking about head forward, okay? So as I move my head forward, and it's not necessarily like this, like it's not about just sticking your head out, but you're thinking about chest and head forward so that your arms are straight up over your head. Obviously, you need to have the prerequisite range of motion available for that, because if you only have, let's say, 150, 160 degrees of shoulder flexion, then maybe you might want to start with a different exercise variation, such as a 75-degree dumbbell press or 75-degree barbell press. But when we're talking about the overhead press, I like to think about that, okay, arms as they're getting up over the head, boom, okay, the head's forward, the chest is forward. And another point there is that, you know, some people will really sweat the actual shoulder position itself in terms of saying, oh, you need to shrug up, or you need to keep your scapula pinched back and locked down, okay, different schools of thought. But like, my basic rule of thumb for people is, look, do whatever your shoulders feel good doing. So if you normally press and you're like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm a bit shrugged up here, that's absolutely fine, okay? Because there is an element of scapulohumeral rhythm here, whereby in order for the arm to get up overhead, the scapula, your shoulder blades, they do need to move out, they do need to laterally rotate or abduct in order to allow that arm to get up overhead. That can be a little bit different in different contexts, including when we have lots of forces to deal with, but ultimately, your bodily movement is your bodily movement, and I'm not going to necessarily tell someone to that they have to shrug up if they don't look like they're shrugging up, or that they have to really pinch down if they're not already pinching down. Okay, different movement strategies can be trialed if someone is, you know, they're having some pain and they want to kind of play around with different strategies, but there's not necessarily a best way. That's why I like to give some general cues, you know, strong wrists, strong core, keep everything tight around the center, keep the glutes tight, have a strong base. That's another thing. Don't stand too narrow, okay? And some people also like to have a staggered stance. I know you can't see my legs, but a staggered stance where one foot is in front of the other, I prefer to have them in more like a squat type fashion, okay? So I can squeeze my quads, I can squeeze my glutes. I'm thinking about grabbing the floor with my feet, so that basically everything beneath my shoulders is immovable. That is what you want. You want it to be an immovable object so that you have as much stability as possible to be able to perform that overhead press. So guys, I hope there's some useful stuff there. If you do have any questions about the overhead press or any other exercise, of course feel free to ask, and I'd be more than happy to discuss some more of the specifics. So that's it from me, guys. Keep it too easy, and remember, of course, be happy. Hence increasing training density.